In September 1828, Isabella and Peter moved to New York with Mr. and Mrs. Greer, who, like Isabella, were Methodist perfectionists. Mrs. Greer assisted Isabella with finding work in the homes of her friends, one of which, the La Tourettes, would influence Isabella's experiences in New York. The La Tourettes treated Isabella and Peter like family. They were Christians and were very religious and held religious meetings in their house. They recently left the Methodist Church because it was moving away from the ideals of John Wesley. James La Tourette created the Holy Club, and their philosophy became known as New York perfectionism. Perfectionists sought to eradicate corruption in the church and move towards a higher moral standard. Its origins lay in the Retrenchment Society, a prayer meeting for wealthy married women started by Francis Folger in 1825. They would visit prisons and pray with criminals and prostitutes in the poorest districts of the city. While living with the La Tourettes, Isabella began preaching with them at the camp gatherings around the city. From 1829 through 1831, Isabella established herself as a powerful and moving preacher. She outpreached the competition and outdrew the renowned John Newland Maffitt. Maffitt was one of the 19th century's most charismatic preachers. Isabella's first appearance in the New York newspapers did not come because of her preaching, but rather her association with a religious commune headed by a wild-eyed man named Prophet Matthias. Isabella met Matthias through Elijah Pearson. His wife Sarah was a member of the Retrenchment Society. Elijah Pearson was a leader in the Holy Club, and his influence peaked when he joined Arthur Tappan in establishing the Magdalen House of Refuge for poor and homeless women. Pearson became a religious fanatic and began to refer to himself as Elijah the Tishbite. He believed, like the prophet Elijah from the Old Testament, 1 Kings 17, he was able to cure illness and resurrect the dead. When his wife died, he was unsuccessful at praying her back to life. Pearson separated from La Tourette's Holy Club and started his church called the Members of Israel at Mount Carmel. Pearson asked Isabella about her baptism, and she told him she was, quote, baptized by the Holy Spirit, end quote. Pearson then concluded that Isabella and himself were kindred spirits. In May 1832, Isabella and Pearson received a visit from Robert Matthews. Matthews referred to himself as the Prophet Matthias. He combed his hair and beard in such a way as to look like Jesus. When Isabella met him at the door, she quoted Matthew chapter 10 and asked, quote, "Art thou the Christ?" Matthews replied, quote, "I am," end quote. Then Isabella burst into tears and kissed his feet. Matthews had experience in using the Bible for his purposes. Matthews claimed that he was the Spirit of Truth. He wore a shiny black leather cone-shaped hat, a green dress coat lined with white or pink satin, a crimson silk sash around his waist, and highly polished Wellington boots. Matthias claimed the Holy Spirit spoke through him and warned about the end of days. Matthias convinced Pearson and Isabella of his divinity. James La Tourette attempted to change Pearson and Isabella's minds about Matthias, but his efforts only encouraged them to embrace him further. In 1883, Matthias pulled Mr. and Mrs. Folgers into the group consisting of Pearson, Isabella, and others. In mid-1833, Pearson and Folgers put the 29-acre Westchester County estate and other properties in Matthias' name. The community consisted of men and women from different classes, with Isabella being the only one who was black. Matthias was called father, but did not see everyone as family. He gave orders to everyone and sat at the head of the table. He demanded that Isabella no longer preached because he considered it out of bounds for women. He beat Isabella for trying to intervene as he whipped one of his young sons. The household revolved around his power, and he took Mrs. Folger as his match spirit. He married her and had a child with her. In exchange, Matthias offered his 18-year-old daughter to Mr. Folger. In 1834, Elijah Pearson died after a series of seizures. Pearson's death brought the Matthias cult under scrutiny by the press, who picked up on the stories. The cult unraveled as Matthias found himself accused of murdering Pearson. The Folgers reconciled and returned to La Tourette, who scolded them for leaving. The Folgers gave Isabella $25 for wages and accused her of trying to poison them. Isabella took the Folgers to court and won $125 in damages, vindicating her reputation. In 1835, the Matthias trial was big news and generated a lot of press coverage. Isabella remained loyal to Matthias and testified on his behalf in court. She also continued to give him money and continued to grow the movement. Matthias eventually became incarcerated for 4 months for assault on his daughter and contempt of court. While in jail, New York City Theater ran a comedy called Matthias the Prophet. After his release, he traveled to Albany and met up with Isabella. Matthias went west by himself and did not allow Isabella to accompany him. This part of Sojourner's story is often left out because it does not match the heroine figure she became in the 1840s and 50s. We wrestle with the riddle of how could the woman who outpreached John Maffitt be beaten up, suppressed from preaching, have her money taken, and continue to be loyal to an abusive charlatan cult leader. She was attracted to the power Matthias held. He was brutal towards her, but, like John Dumont, seemed to care for her. We must not forget, Isabella was only a few years out of slavery, and abuse felt like a genuine part of life. Isabella returned to New York City to rejoin her son Peter, who stayed there while she lived with the Matthias cult. Things changed in New York since Sojourner left. Her son found it hard to keep a job and became known as a troublemaker. Sojourner believed that he needed more schooling to interest him in work. One of her wealthy friends agreed to pay for his tuition. Peter cut classes to go dancing and got arrested for petty theft. The Reverend Peter Williams Jr. came to deal with young Peter, knowing what to do with troubled black youth. Peter Williams Jr. founded the first black newspaper in the U.S., the New York Freedom's Journal, in 1827. Williams Jr. told Isabella he knew what to do with Peter to straighten him out. He arranged for Peter to join the legions of black men who found a better opportunity seafaring than in the city. Peter left for the sea to work, and it was the last time Sojourner saw her son. Isabella received letters from Peter, with the last coming in September 1841. She never saw Peter again or ever found out what happened to him. In 1843, Isabella transformed herself into Sojourner Truth. Isabella appropriated the title Truth from her former spiritual leader, the Prophet Matthias. The Spirit of Truth is also the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit as conceived in the Gospel of John, who, sent by God the Father and Jesus the Son, comes to convince people of sins and judgment. John chapter 16, verses 7 through 16. Isabella believed the Holy Spirit provided her with supernatural power and strength. The last name Truth designated her role as a preacher. In her narrative, she says that life in the city seemed to be a, quote, great drama, end quote, no more than, quote, one great system of robbery and wrong, end quote. She felt that she was not only a witness to the hardships of the city, but a contributor as well. It was clear to her that it was time to leave New York City. Like Lot in the book of Genesis, Isabella had to flee the wicked city. A sojourner is a traveler who is in someone else's home for a temporary stay. Isabella believed it was time for her to set on a pilgrimage to tell people to come to Jesus before the end of days. She believed that the world was ending soon and that we would witness the second coming of Jesus. With 2 York shillings and a pillowcase of belongings, she set out into the world as Sojourner Truth. Hey y'all, listen, High Velocity Philosophy is a brand new channel, and I'm just going to do whatever I want on here. And if you like this kind of content, I really appreciate it if you liked, shared, and subscribed to this channel, all right? Peace.